Greetings, students. I'm Dr. Sadri, your instructor for this course. And what we are going to do today is we're going to focus on Module 10. As you can see from the title of our PowerPoint, Module 10 focuses on oil, politics, and development. So in other words, what it's trying to do is it's trying to bring together two very interesting parts of our field, political development with economic development. And of course, in terms of economic development, the area of the Middle East that we have been focusing on, especially in the Persian Gulf area and some parts of North Africa, what people call MENA, is that right? Middle East and North Africa, MENA standing for that, right? One of the major instruments of economic development, or some people call it modernization or industrialization, has been what? Has been the revenues coming from oil. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit later on about how countries that they don't have as much oil have been trying to do that type of economic development, like Egypt later. But let's start with, first of all, introducing you to the PowerPoint that we have here. As you can see, we're going to start with introduction. We talk about the three sectors of any economy: the industrial part, the agricultural part, the service one, and then we focus on general topics like economic growth and political decay. Then we can talk about economic decay and political growth, okay? Then we talk about the GCC countries or Gulf Cooperation Council countries, and then we talk a little bit about prospect for future. First of all, notice that the main text that I chose for you, and we have the scanned version of it as reading and everything, it actually goes all the way to 2000, which is like the information would say, oh, wait a minute, that's 2 decades old, But the essence of what he's talking about is very important, because some of the same factors, they come to play a very, very important role right now, and it's like repeating the history, okay, with some minor changes. So what I did was, because Professor Bill, James Bill, he writes very, very neutrally, and there are not very many books, unfortunately, about the Middle East politics that are really written neutrally, all right? So at least he takes us all the way to the end of basically the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century, and then the rest of it is the job of the articles I've chosen for you and the lectures I give you with the examples that I use to make what? To material most updated for you. Okay, now, having said that, let me start by going over our very first slide. And then here is the notion of the introduction. As always, what do? We owe our readers the whole idea of why should they pay attention? What's the significance of this topic? And then we can, after that, we can talk about the oil boom. Okay, the significance of the major product of this region, which when we think about Middle East, we think about all Middle Eastern countries have oil. This is not true, as you know. Is that right? Yes, the countries in the Persian Gulf, they have oil, but not even all of them. Oman doesn't have oil, okay? I mean, it has a little bit, to be sufficient for its own consumption, but Oman is not a major oil producer like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and, Iran and Iraq, you see? So that's important. And then throughout the Middle East, you see that in the other regions of the Middle East, like for example, Jordan doesn't really have something to export. Syria doesn't have something to export. Lebanon doesn't have something. So their economies are focused on other factors that, we're going to use some examples for that. And then in North Africa region of the so-called Middle East, is that right? Egypt doesn't have much. They have some oil field in the, in the peninsula, in the Sinai Peninsula. But then Libya has some, Algeria has some, and then again, Morocco doesn't have enough for export. They have enough for themselves, all right? So having said that one, let's talk about why in this part of the world we focus so much on oil. Okay, you have the political map, is that right? And what I put right here is the part that really is so significant as far as oil is concerned, which is basically Persian Gulf, Gulf of Oman, okay? This is the area that, as you can see, we have Iran as a dominant northern neighbor. We have Saudi Arabia, is that right, in the south. We have, UAE, then Oman comes here on the side. And then we have Qatar, and right there we have Kuwait and Bahrain. Is that right? You can see the name Kuwait and Bahrain. And of course, Iraq is right there. All right. So this is what I wanted to mention as far as that one is concerned. Now, what else do we want to mention? We wanted to mention why is it significant? Look at this map, okay? This map is a very interesting map showing what? Showing basically all the, oil wells, okay? Gas fields, and you see that like those little ships? Those are what? Those are the tankers. And those are the areas where these tankers can come, take the, product, is that right? Always is in crude form, okay? That's one of the things that the economy of these countries are doing. And you can see, by the way, we use these, maps from Google Images and everything, and they're all from reliable sources like Britannica and oil, what is it? Oil and gas, journal. So we want to make sure that we give credit where the credit is due. All right. So they've done a pretty good job. This map is from oil and what? Gas, journal. Look at one. The nice thing about this one is it simply shows the gas field in red and the oil field in what? In green. Look at the concentration of it. So much of it is near Iran, and of course some of it Kuwait, Iraq, and some in Saudi Arabia, and some in, UAE, and, others. Isn't it amazing? So look at the concentration of power. Considering that the world today has an addiction, okay? What's the addiction? The addiction is to fossil fuel in form of oil and natural gas, okay? I mean, really, 21st century life would not be happening without oil and gas. Yes, we do have alternative source of energy. We have wind energy. We have solar energy. But we have nuclear energy. But they're much smaller, portion of our power generation. And without power, you cannot run an economy, okay? Especially in the 21st century. So I wanted to make sure that that is there. And then I have actually right here a map. If you can get it work, here we go. A map of, for example, one of those, oil and gas fields right in the what? Like in the Persian Gulf, as you can see right there. So it's kind of interesting. So I just wanted you to be familiar. I know some of you probably in our own Gulf of Mexico have seen some of those, but I thought it would be kind of interesting for you to see that. Okay, having said that one, let's go back right there. So you see how significant. Now, significance of the oil in this part of the world is 3 factors. And you need to remember that one because that has been a short answer for a number of times. And guess what? From that particular notion, we can get multiple choice questions from it. We can get essay question of it. Why the oil in this area is significant? Significant number 1 is the quality of it. The oil from the Persian Gulf has the lowest amount of impurities. They call it, Brent, okay? Persian Gulf Brent, okay? Has the lowest amount of what? Impurities. Usually one of the major impurities in oil is sulfur. So if you go near, for example, a oil refinery, you see that it smells like, rotten, eggs. That eggy smell comes from sulfur, processing sulfur. And it costs a lot of money to process that one out of it. The oil from this is such a high quality, it has very, very little sulfur, if at all. That's one. Number 2, look at where it's located. You see? It's located very, very close, is that right? To the, to the sea. And in what? And grabbing it is very easy. Look at right there. How is the grabbing it? The grabbing it is all you need to do is dig a hole, go straight, make sure that if you want oil first, hit the oil first and not what? Natural gas. Because this is what is happening. When you dig for, oil, on the top of it is natural gas. Middle of it is what? Oil. And then just below it is what? Salt water. So what you want to do is you want to hit the oil part, because if you hit the oil part first, natural gas wants to escape first. Guess what? If you hit it right, you do not even need a motor to pump it out. Okay? Because natural gas is going to automatically push all the oil out first, and then when it pushes all the oil out first, then it's going to come. So here we go. You don't even need to spend any money for motors or anything else in that regard. But in the old time, and sometimes when they make a mistake and they hit the gas first, unfortunately, and I'm sure you've seen it. Is that right? You've seen it actually in our oil fields as well. They have to burn that, and that's so sad because here we go, something that we could actually use, but because they hit it first, they have to burn that one before they get to everything else. Now, all of the gas that we see in the homes and propane gas and this and that and all that stuff is actually from natural gas, all right? So if they would be prepared for it, they could maybe pipe that one also and then make it a liquid format, is that right? And there are tankers that they take LNG, is that right? Basically liquid form of a natural gas, in liquid form. And that can be shipped as well. And as I mentioned, there are super tankers for that one as well. You can see that one. This map does not show exactly all the super tankers. It just shows what? Tanker terminals and everything, but you can see, in a relatively very small area, lots of traffic. Is that right? So, again, back to the quality. Why is it important? Number one, because it's pure quality. Number two, easy to reach. Is that right? Number three, easy to what? Export. Look at how close these ports are to the Persian Gulf. And then what's the cheapest way of shipping something? That's why we call it shipping. Is that right? You put it on a tanker and you send it, you sell it. So if you really think about it from an economic perspective, this is a cheapest way of selling your most precious thing because you don't do what we talk about it usually in my international political economy classes. We call it, you don't do any value added. You don't add the value really of your labor. Because if you think about it, you basically, ship it crude. So this crude goes somewhere else. They're going to refine it. They add value to it. Now, when they refine it, they can make it to different things. Like, for example, they can refine the gas into being different type of fertilizers. They can refine oil not only for fuels that we are, asphalts, different type of grease, different type of Vaselines, different type of oil you can imagine. Every type of oil you can imagine. Some you cannot, okay? Because it's so sophisticated. All right. So, unfortunately, many of these countries that they could, with all that stuff, have the power to refine it first, they don't. Many times they do have refineries, but they use those refineries for what? Domestic consumption. And then they ship it to major industrial countries in both East and West, Japan and what? And China and India, and then in the West, of course, to Europe and North America, and that's what happens. Okay, so you saw the field, you saw the concentration, you saw the geographic area. Now let's go back to it. So then we had the oil boom. In 1970s, there was an oil boom. And what happened as a result of that, guess what? Suddenly, many of these countries, they got rich because many of them, they started negotiating with the major oil company, foreign oil companies that was using their resource. They increased their what? Revenue from that. So they increased their revenue. What they did was, with that oil revenue, they started major economic development in terms of buildings, roads, railroad, airport, of course, office space, housing, you name it, they did it, all the way from 1970s. Now, you look at the pictures of the area before 1970s, after 1970s, what a difference. Is that right? Some of those places that they developed so much, like for example, I'm sure you've heard about Dubai, is that right? They say Dubai is the Paris of the Middle East. Well, that name was usually reserved for Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, which is, poor thing, Lebanon has become what? One of the has a lot of educated people, but it has been damaged so much, so many civil wars, right in the next to, the Arab-Israeli conflict and everything has been damaged so much that it's, Beirut is not as popular as what right now, and, Abu Dhabi and Dubai. Abu Dhabi and Dubai, right there, they get a lot of what? Attention. And they're very business oriented and everything else. So the boom is still continuing over there. You see many universities, American and Western universities, they go over there actually opening up branches. We have students going and coming, and there's students coming and going. So there's a lot of what? Lot associated with that. Having said enough about that, let's go to the next section. And the next section is talking about industries. Now remember, we have three sectors of the economy. We have the industrial part, we have the agricultural part, and last but not least, we have the what? The service part. Here in Florida, we know a whole lot about service. We're going to talk about that one as a, drawing point next. So what's the significance of industry, the significance of industry is going to be that if somebody wants to move on from a developing country, which is basically an agrarian society, is that right, to an industrial country, you need to even mechanize your what? Your farms. So you could have a higher yield from whatever you're growing. You're growing rice, you're growing wheat, you're growing corn, you know? These are things you need for, you know, to feed your people in some way or another. And then you use some of that also for raising, you know, domestic animals, you know, because you need dairy products. You need, you know, you either have cows or sheep or goats or whatever, and they all provide milk. And they're, from that milk, you can get different type of cheese, different type of, you know, butters, different type of this, different type of that, different type of yogurt. You see, those are all again part of the what? Diet of that part of the world. So that's a significance part, because the industry, you know, is not just establishing factories. There are factories in many of these places, okay, but many of them they're basically like, you know, as a, you know, solution to import substitution. Like for example, they were importing toothbrushes. Okay, now they have, you know, production of oil and something. Well, some of the oil changes to a plastic. Is that right? And then they can, you know, make, okay, this is going to be the handle of it, this is going to be the brush of it. So they do very, very simple thing. They're still not doing it in a very large scale, because big corporations like Colgate, Crest, and everything else, they go over there and they what? They try to sell them their license, so they're producing it locally, you see? It's not their own nature. The nature of the industry is very important, of course, as I mentioned, not only would include the agricultural sector, but also factories and, you know, any kind of innovation like that. And then last but not least, what are the challenges with it? Okay, many people, they suggest that the industries in that part of the world, they're not really developed that sophisticatedly. Why? Because many of them are dependent. If, for example, they're putting if they have car manufacturing, like among all the countries over there, Iran has car manufacturing, and Turkey is putting some, you know, stuff together. Is that right? Okay, so they're doing this thing, but sometimes some of the major part of the engine was coming from outside. Now Iranians being under a lot of sanction and everything, they've started doing more and more and more and more. Like from the Hillman company of Great Britain, they used to build a car called, you know, instead of Hillman, they would call it Paycon. Paycon means arrow, okay? And then from Peugeot company of, you know, France, they had like something called Citroëns or something. They were again building those things. They're very, very basic cars. You know, it's not sophisticated like Mercedes or Porsches or something like that. But you know, it's a type of thing that, you know, helps in a general public to have, you know, something to drive around. So industry in that regard was very, very important. Now here we go. Agriculture. Agriculture is important. First of all, you have to feed your people. Is that right? I mean, just in a country that cannot feed their people, and that was one of the challenges that some people say that it led to the Iranian Revolution. There was a prime minister called Prime Minister Hoveyda, and he would go over there and say, you know, people were complaining, what is happening to our farms? You know, all of the peasants are coming and farmers are coming to the cities to work and this and that, and they do this activity. He said, well, we are a rich country, we have money, instead of producing it, we can buy it. Well, this sounds interesting and maybe makes sense to some people, but in reality, you know, it makes you vulnerable to, you know, any kind of pressure from outside, because if you do not produce all your own food product or a significant part of it, somebody who is selling you food could put pressure on you so to change your vote. This is not limited to Iran. During the Cold War, every time you know, Soviet Union wanted to make sure that Castro's regime in Cuba, is that right, is going to be voting for the Soviet Union, because sometimes Castro's policy in Africa was very different from Soviet policies. Is that right? Sometimes the Soviet, they didn't want to necessarily directly go over somewhere and maybe promote something, and Castro was saying, no, you know, these people, they need to be liberated, because remember, they had a different. Yes, they were both socialistic countries, but, you know, not all of their policies, they were feeding very well with each other. So every time Moscow at that time wanted to put pressure on Havana, guess what? They made the next shipment of, you know, food, you know, items, because, you know, in Cuba they do produce their own sugar cane and some of the, you know, local pigs and local this and local that and local corn and so, but they cannot produce everything. So they were dependent on what? On Soviet Union. This type of relationship can continue with anybody, you know. If you do not have enough of your own, what happens? You depend on others. All right. So enough about that one. Obviously, food is very important. The nature of it is different. Typical agrarian societies is becoming more mechanized and everything. And of course, the challenge is that a lot of the farmers have left the rural areas because the money is so much better in the cities. It's much better to be a labor, and you can make $10, $15. For us, 10 maybe is not so much money here in U.S., but over there they could be making only $4 or $5 an hour, and they are happy, as opposed to working in the whole farm the entire year. And when you divide it into how many days I work and how much I produce, your salary ends up being like 50 cents a day or $1 a day. So $1 a day as opposed to $4 or $5 an hour. Why not? You see, people are not stupid. They're rational creatures. So that has been one of the challenges, and many of these countries, they kind of lost their agricultural sector, unless they were under pressure again for food. Like for example, when we put Iran under a lot of sanction and everything, Iran started producing a lot of its own So in fact, it helped them to be more independent. Is that right? But many of the other countries, for example, because I've traveled, I travel, I'm an area study person, so I've traveled to all of those countries. Yes, some of them, they have local names. When you go to the groceries, there are some local producers. Most of them are not. You can find any kind of American food, European food right there, okay? So, all right, having said that, now one of the newest sectors over there is that whole service sector. We have a tendency to take service sector for granted, but state of Florida actually depends on the service. What is that? Tourism. Is that right? Now traditional services would be like insurance and banking and this and that. You see what I mean? Consulting and accounting and marketing. These are all services, okay? But we here in Florida, we certainly do benefit from tourism, and that's why our state officially doesn't have state income tax. All right. So over there, there were services like that before. Yes, smaller banks, smaller this, smaller that, but now that section is becoming larger because some of them also, like Florida, they really focus on what? Tourism. Egypt is one of them that is famous. Jordan is another one. Is that right? And some of it is regular tourism. Some of it is religious tourism. People, they wanted to go over there to be near the Holy Land. And, of course, Israel is getting a whole lot of that. Not maybe right now with all the wars and everything going on over there. But, has been traditionally getting a lot of people coming in and going to the sites and everything else. So religious tourism, regular tourism, they're beautiful areas. Like, for example, I've gone with, with my parents and everything, and actually then later on with my own family to, for example, the areas like Sharm el-Sheikh in Sinai, in the southern part of Sinai and everything. They have built a wonderful resort. You snorkel over there, the water is clean and this and that, snorkel, and you can see any kind of creature you can see. So there are a lot of interesting places to see. So service industry over there is increasing, but just like in the US, service jobs usually, unless you are a lawyer and a CPA and you charge your clients tremendous amount of money, lower level like transportation, busing, taxis, things like that, and local tourism, and even, in fact, even restaurant or something, you don't make really that much money. It's really higher services, like consulting, accounting, laws, and those type of things that you make a lot of money. So it's obviously significant, and the nature of it is relatively new, especially the more newer services. And of course, the challenge is always making sure that you have enough services to provide. Okay, so then here we go to the next slide. And in the next slide, it has a very interesting notion of of the process which is happening in that part of the world. Remember, we're talking about economic and political development. Is that right? In Western Europe, the Western European model of development was economic development, after Enlightenment, of course. Economic development happened first after people started getting educated and started asking questions. And with this new education, there was new, modes of production, and there was more surplus, and so people are eating better food, they're having extra income, this and that. And what happened after people, they become more educated and they have what? And they have extra income. They start asking the tough question from political leaders. Why? Okay, that's the toughest question. Because you say, okay, you made that decision. Why? Why am I not doing as well as some other people? I'm working pretty hard. You see, why? Okay, so then most of the developmentalist, scholars, or the ones who believe in development theory, they say what happened in the West is going to happen everywhere, which is economic development after education leads to political development. Now, when we study Middle East, you see that that's not necessarily true. Is that right? Okay, and that's one of the interesting part of it. And sometimes things can go back. And then some of the theories that Max Weber and other people, they talked about, like the religion becomes institutional, goes down. Well, not necessarily. Sometimes religion comes back. Like that was the whole idea of Iranian Revolution. We're going to talk about those case studies at the end of the semester. It can come back. So these are the things that you should consider. So how I can summarize it, and I'm responding basically to all those emails that you guys have sent me, because some of you are kind of lost among all the literature that you have to read, is this. If you're talking about economic growth and political decay, is that right? One of the things that has happened is the countries that they had some kind of revenue, like oil, natural gas, etc., is that right? They use it as, they became what we call rentier state. They didn't really tax their people. Is that right? Like, especially the most conservative, Arab states in the Persian Gulf. Is that right? Like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, etc. Really, there's not much of a tax there, Yes, there's some very minor stuff, but why? Because the state is making so much money, the king comes over there, or the emir comes over there and says, okay, this is a part of all of our national wealth, so you go to school for free, you do this for free, we can give you, loans at a very, very low, interest rate, like 1%, 0.5%, or, you borrow for something to go to the school, and, as long as you work here and there, be paid. They have a lot of benefit. So they basically get a rent from that natural resource that they're making money. That's what they call a rentier state. There are also some ideas of regional integration, like GCC countries, like Gulf Cooperation countries. They try to do, first it came about as a result of this fear of Iraq and Iran, the two great powers in in the Persian Gulf area. But in reality, what happened was they were trying to get together because they thought, okay, if I produce something and my market is so small, because these countries are not very large. The largest one of them is Saudi Arabia, has barely about 20 million people, even with statistics, we heighten it up or something. All right, as of now, of course, So here we go. They thought they should have some kind of economic connection with each other, and actually that has been more, successful than some of their, military integration or something. So that has been something. But I don't want you to think about, so they have their version of European Union. Is that right? Middle Eastern Union? No, it's not such a thing. It's very, very minor things, and usually certain countries. The other aspect is, and in this case, when there has been some kind of economic growth, still political development hasn't happened. So what happened to that development theory that was supposed to work? Hasn't. Okay. Next one, economic decay but political growth. In places like, for example, Egypt and some of the other places that, oh my goodness, the presidents are president for life. Is that right? Nasser was president until he died. Saddam was, Anwar Sadat, so not Saddam. Well, Saddam was a president in Iraq until we got rid of him. Is that right? And then Anwar Sadat in Egypt was the president, until he got assassinated. Is that right? And then after that, Hosni Mubarak until the basically, Arab Spring got rid of him. Okay, so here we're talking about places that really there is not much of a political growth. There is not true democracies and everything that people want. They sometimes allowed a little bit of an economic benefits here and there, a little bit of a privatization, a little bit of allowing policies that help. Like, for example, there is the policy, during the lean years that they're talking about is when the budget was very tight. So they thought, okay, government cannot produce all these things. Let pass some of these responsibilities to a private sector. So they came up with, intifah, policies. And the intifah policies under Anwar Sadat was basically leading to a little bit of a privatization, but that was a privatization that focused mostly on consumption. So basically a lot of things was imported, and then the people who were doing that one, selling it to their own people, they were getting rich. It wasn't really focused on production, Because when you have production, you satisfy your domestic market, and then you have something to export, and you have something to, not as opposed to losing your what? Losing your country's money, you're paying to foreign, exporters to your country. Is that right? So then under, for example, Hosni Mubarak, they came out with Intifai Intijai, which is basically trying to correct some of those mistakes and everything, because that previous, situation was increasing the gap between rich and poor, and that was, in no society, increasing the gap is a good idea. So then what they did was they allowed, they made some adjustment to that one to make it with, that as I mentioned earlier, that focuses a little bit more on production. All right. And then in terms of the last slide, we can say that, of course, that price, so we are separating cases like Egypt, is that right? Jordan, Syria, very much from what? Oil-producing Arab countries. Here we go. When I say oil-producing Arab countries, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, is that right? Bahrain, Qatar, you see, UAE, and even Oman, is that right? So these countries under Saudi Arabia, they kind of got organized during the Iran-Iraq war, and when Iran went from a monarchy to to an Islamic republic and everything, they were afraid of not just Iran, also Saddam Hussein of Iraq. Is that right? Which, if you remember, he was the president all the way up to what? 2003, when we basically invaded Iraq and got rid of him. All right. Because the man was interested in expanding his territory. He had attacked Iran in 1980, and then, of course, in 1990, a decade later, he attacked Kuwait, okay? And he has his eye on parts of Saudi Arabia as well. All right, so here we see that the GCC countries, they are oil exporters, and they actually have some non-oil products as well, like, they have like dates and some other like spices or something, but it's not that significant. The oil price and the oil revenue is much more significant. And there is also non-GCC oil, non-GCC oil exporting states, and these non-GCC countries, like for some Iran, Iraq, is that right? That they are producing oil, but one thing about them and the difference between them and GCC countries, the only GCC country with a significant population is Saudi Arabia, okay? All the other ones, they have a population of only a few million, if it even makes it to the million. You see what I mean? They don't have very large population. But the non-GCC countries, Iran has 80 million people, okay? Iraq has like 30-something, 5 million people. You see, these are significant amount of population, no matter how you would like to calculate it. So that's a different situation. So in those countries, you do not see oil benefits like everywhere else. Maybe the price of oil that you put in your car is cheaper, of course, because it's domestic product, okay? But you're not going to see the benefits that the Kuwaitis get or Saudis get. Oh yeah, I'm getting like this for free, I'm getting that for free, or I don't pay any taxes or something. So we see that there is also taxation becomes an issue little by little because there is not enough rent. The government needs some kind of revenue, is that right, to carry on its expenses. So what can we say for prospect for future? The trends that we see over there, the decay and the process between political and economic development that Bill beautifully represents over there, is a situation that continues all the way to what? To the present. And of course, how I have updated for you is with the articles that I got for you, classical articles, the newer articles, and then the discussion we have in the class. If you have any question, you know what to do, you contact me. Thank you for your attention.